Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Today we're diving into a heartbreaking yet powerful love story. A wealthy CEO who risks his entire empire, defies his ruthless father, and is willing to lose everything for a simple country girl. But when his father declares war and threatens to destroy it all, will their love survive? If you love emotional dramas full of tension and sacrifice, this one will hit you hard. If you're enjoying it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. The atmosphere outside the emergency room was thick with unbearable tension. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as the hours dragged on in that cold, sterile waiting area. CEO Quân paced back and forth across the polished hospital tiles, the sound of his expensive leather shoes echoing sharply in the quiet hallway. His normally sharp, perfectly tailored suit was now disheveled, his tie completely loosened and hanging loosely around his neck, his hair messy from constantly running his fingers through it in frustration and fear. The powerful, commanding businessman who always dominated every boardroom, closed massive deals, and maintained absolute control over his empire had completely vanished. In his place was a man stripped of all his armor, consumed by overwhelming anxiety and helplessness. His heart pounded violently in his chest as he stared at the closed double doors, silently begging for any sign of hope. Every distant beep of a monitor, every hurried footsteps of nurses rushing by, every muffled voice from behind those doors only intensified his inner torment. He felt completely powerless for the first time in his life, a feeling so foreign and terrifying to someone who had built his entire identity around strength and control. After what felt like an eternity of agonizing wait, the doors finally swung open. The doctor stepped out, exhaustion clear on his face, but with a nod of relief that brought a flicker of light into the darkness. He announced that Ly Tu Tieu had successfully passed the critical stage and was now stable. Those words crashed over CEO Quân like a massive wave of salvation. Relief flooded through him so intensely that his legs nearly gave way. Without wasting a single second, he pushed past the medical staff and burst into her hospital room, his movements driven by pure desperation and love. The sight that greeted him inside nearly shattered what was left of his composure. Tieu lay motionless on the narrow hospital bed, her face deathly pale and drained of all color under the harsh, unforgiving, fluorescent lights that cast long, cold shadows across the sterile white walls. Medical equipment surrounded her like silent guardians, monitors beeping rhythmically, IV drips trailing from her delicate arms, oxygen tubes positioned carefully near her face. She looked so incredibly fragile and vulnerable, a heartbreaking contrast to the strong, vibrant woman he had fallen so deeply in love with. The room smelled of antiseptic and medicine, the air heavy with the weight of recent crisis. Overcome by a torrent of emotions, CEO Quân dropped to his knees right beside her bed. His strong, capable hands, the same hands that had signed contracts worth millions and commanded respect in the business world, now trembled uncontrollably as he gently clasped her cold, lifeless-feeling fingers. Tears streamed freely down his cheeks without shame. This was not the composed, feared CEO that the outside world knew and respected. This was a man completely laid bare, his deepest fears and vulnerabilities exposed in the quiet hum of the machines. "You scared me to death," he whispered, his voice hoarse, cracking with raw, unfiltered emotion. The weight of those words hung heavily in the air between them. In that intimate, painful moment, all his achievements, his status, his power, and his wealth suddenly meant absolutely nothing compared to the sheer terror he had felt at the thought of losing her forever. In the days that followed, CEO Quan's transformation was nothing short of complete. He refused to leave her side even for a moment, canceling every single high-powered meeting on his schedule and letting urgent business calls go straight to voicemail. The man who once lived and breathed his company, who had dedicated years to building his empire, now dedicated every single second to her recovery and comfort. He personally took charge in the small hospital kitchen area, carefully preparing warm, nutritious porridge using fresh ingredients he had specially brought in from outside. With incredible patience, he would blow gently on each spoonful to cool it perfectly before feeding her. His every movement filled with such tenderness and care that it seemed almost impossible for someone with his reputation of toughness and authority. Whenever Tieu experienced moments of discomfort or broke into a cold sweat from the lingering pain, CEO Quân was immediately there with a soft, clean cloth, gently wiping her forehead and neck with infinite patience and love. His mere presence seemed to ease the heavy, clinical atmosphere of the hospital ward, bringing a sense of warmth and humanity into the cold, impersonal space. During the long, quiet nights when the hospital corridors grew silent and the lights dimmed to a gentle glow, CEO Quân remained right by her bedside. He held her hand firmly yet gently, sharing soft, comforting stories from their shared past. Light-hearted memories, funny anecdotes from their early days together. Anything that might bring even the faintest smile to her tired face and help distract her from the physical suffering she was enduring. His deep, resonant voice filled the room like a warm, protective embrace, speaking slowly and soothingly in the stillness. The sterile smell of antiseptic and the constant low hum of medical machines seemed to fade into the background whenever he was speaking to her. The nurses on duty couldn't help but notice and exchange soft, knowing smiles as they passed by the room, witnessing this powerful, successful man pouring his entire heart and soul into caring for the woman he loved so profoundly. Tieu, though still weak and recovering, watched him through her half-closed eyes with a complex swirl of emotions. Her heart swelled with overwhelming gratitude, deep love, and a painful sense of guilt all at once. She could clearly see the exhaustion etched into his features, the dark circles under his eyes, and the way his broad shoulders carried the invisible, heavy burden of constant worry and fear. Yet his determination never faltered for even a second. In those tender, private, and deeply intimate moments shared between them, their emotional bond deepened in ways words could barely describe. She felt truly seen, truly protected, and truly cherished in a manner she had never experienced before in her life. The successful, commanding CEO had transformed into her strongest anchor, her safest harbor amid the storm of pain and recovery. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to truly believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead together as one. But as anyone who has lived through real life knows, moments of fragile peace like this rarely last forever. Especially when two completely different worlds, one of wealth, status, and calculated alliances, and one of genuine, heartfelt love, inevitably collide. One quiet afternoon, while CEO Quân was carefully adjusting the pillows behind Tieu back and whispering gentle words of encouragement and love to lift her spirits, the door to the private hospital room suddenly swung open. A distinguished man in his mid-50s entered with an air of absolute authority. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored vest that radiated old money, power, and unshakable confidence. His arrival instantly transformed the warm, intimate energy in the room into something cold and tense. This was CEO Quan's father, a formidable figure whose presence alone could command respect and often fear in elite business circles. He stood there for a long moment, his sharp, calculating eyes scanning the emotional scene before locking directly onto Tieu, lying weakly in the hospital bed. His expression remained cold, distant, and unmistakably disapproving. CEO Quân straightened up slowly from his position beside the bed, his body instinctively shifting into a protective stance, ready to shield the woman he loved from whatever was coming. Without offering any greeting or pleasantries, his father spoke directly, his voice low but sharp as a blade cutting through the air. "What exactly do you plan to do with her? He glanced dismissively toward Tieu before turning back to his son with piercing intensity. Our family is in the middle of a major, high-stakes partnership with the Bien family. You cannot allow a simple country girl to ruin everything we have worked so hard to build over the years. The words landed with brutal force, cutting through the room like a knife. The implication was crystal clear and deeply painful. In his father's elite world of strategic business alliances, social status, and carefully maintained power structures, Tieu was viewed as nothing more than an outsider, someone unworthy who threatened to dismantle years of calculated relationships and opportunities. The partnership with the Bien family symbolized immense power, wealth, prestige, and future success, something far too valuable to risk over what his father saw as a temporary, ill-advised romance. Tieu felt her chest constrict with sharp emotional pain. She lay there silently, unable to find her voice, as hot tears began to slide uncontrollably down her pale cheeks. She had never wanted any of this. She had never intended to become the source of such painful conflict between CEO Quân and his family. The physical pain she had endured from her medical crisis suddenly felt insignificant compared to the deep emotional agony of watching the man she loved being torn between her and his entire family legacy. Waves of guilt washed over her, making it difficult even to breathe. CEO Quan's face hardened with unyielding resolve. For the first time in his entire life, he raised his voice to his father, the powerful words pouring out from the deepest part of his soul. "I don't care about the partnership or the company at all. All I know is that without Tieu, I would have no reason left to continue living." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. His father's expression shifted rapidly from stern disapproval to visible shock, and then to barely contained fury. This was not the obedient, dutiful son he had raised and meticulously groomed to inherit and expand the family empire. This was a man standing at a crossroads, ready to burn down everything if it meant protecting the woman he loved. The long, simmering conflict between father and son had finally exploded into the open, forever altering the dynamics of their relationship. Yet even amid that explosive tension, CEO Quân turned back toward Tieu with gentle determination. He sat down carefully on the edge of her bed and pulled her softly into his strong arms, holding her close as if trying to shield her from the entire outside world and all its harsh judgments. "I choose you," he whispered softly, but with absolute conviction against her hair. "No matter what I have to give up, no matter what consequences come, I will never regret choosing you." In that heartfelt embrace, their love felt stronger and more real than any external pressure or family expectation. However, it also quietly marked the beginning of even greater challenges and emotional trials that still lay ahead on their path. This story is far from over, and the emotional stakes continue to rise dramatically. We left off at that explosive and heartbreaking moment where CEO Quân stood up to his powerful father and chose love over family expectations, business interests, and everything he had built. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I highly recommend going back to watch it first, because the emotional buildup and tension make this second half even more intense, powerful, and deeply moving. Now let's continue diving deep into the raw emotions, the difficult consequences, the tender, intimate moments, and the strong, unbreakable bond between Tieu and CEO Quân as they try to hold on to their love after that life-changing decision. The silence that filled the hospital room right after CEO Quan's bold declaration was absolutely deafening. His father stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity, his face shifting rapidly through so many emotions, from complete shock to disbelief, and finally settling into pure, cold, and calculated anger. The older man's sharp eyes narrowed dangerously as he looked at his son one last time, the disappointment and rage clearly visible on his stern face. Without saying another single word, he turned sharply on his heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him with a loud, heavy thud that echoed through the quiet hospital corridor like a dark warning of the many storms that were still yet to come. CEO Quân didn't run after him. He made the choice to stay right where he was needed most, beside the woman he loved. He immediately turned back to Tiểu, sat down carefully on the edge of her hospital bed, and pulled her gently but firmly into his strong, warm arms. He held her close against his chest, one hand slowly and tenderly stroking her soft hair, while the other rubbed soothing, comforting circles on her back. "I choose you," he whispered softly, but with absolute conviction and deep emotion in his voice. "No matter what I have to give up, no matter what challenges, difficulties, or consequences come our way, I will never regret choosing you. You are my everything, Tiểu. You're the reason I want to keep fighting every single day." Tiểu buried her face deeper into his shoulder, her body trembling slightly as quiet tears continued to fall down her cheeks. She felt an overwhelming mixture of love, gratitude, relief, and a heavy sense of guilt all at once. This powerful, successful man had just risked his entire world, his family legacy, and his company for her. In the hours that followed, the sterile hospital room slowly transformed into their own small, private sanctuary, protected from the chaos and judgment of the outside world. CEO Quân continued caring for her with the same incredible tenderness and devotion he had shown since the very beginning. He personally fed her warm, nutritious porridge spoon by spoon, gently wiped the sweat from her forehead whenever she felt uncomfortable or had moments of pain, and carefully adjusted her pillows so she could rest more easily and breathe better. But beyond all the physical care, he opened up to her emotionally in ways he had never done before with anyone. He admitted how terrified and broken he had been during those long, agonizing hours waiting outside the emergency room. He described in detail how the fear of losing her had completely shattered his worldview and made him realize that all his success, wealth, status, achievements, and power suddenly felt completely meaningless and empty without her by his side. His deep, resonant voice was gentle, slow, and full of vulnerability as he shared these innermost fears and thoughts with her. Tiểu, still physically weak from her ordeal, but gaining more emotional strength every moment from his unwavering support, listened carefully and eventually opened up about her own complicated and conflicting feelings. She spoke honestly about the overwhelming joy of being loved so completely and selflessly, but also about the heavy guilt that weighed on her heart, the deep fear that she might become a burden that could destroy his relationship with his family and ruin the company he had spent many years building with blood, sweat, and tears. She worried deeply about the huge social and economic gap between their backgrounds and how cruelly the outside world, especially the elite circles CEO Quân belonged to, would judge and criticize their relationship. CEO Quân listened patiently and attentively, never interrupting her, and reassured her again and again with sincere, heartfelt words that none of those external things mattered to him anymore. To him, she was worth every single sacrifice he might have to make in the future. Their conversation flowed naturally and deeply, moving between moments of profound emotional reflection, quiet and gentle laughter when they recalled happier memories from their past together, and hopeful, beautiful dreams about a simpler and more peaceful life they could build together. One filled with quiet mornings, shared meals without any pressure, evening walks under the sky, and nights where they could simply be themselves without the heavy weight of family expectations and endless business responsibilities. As the afternoon light slowly faded away and turned into evening, with soft shadows gently lengthening across the hospital room, a fragile but precious sense of peace finally settled over the two of them. CEO Quân helped Tiểu settle back comfortably against the pillows, making sure she was warm, safe, and as relaxed as possible. He promised once again, with full sincerity, that he would stay right by her side through the entire night, just as he had done every single night since she was admitted. For a brief, beautiful, and hopeful moment, it truly felt like they might actually be able to face whatever the future held together as a strong team. But just as they were sharing this quiet, hopeful, and intimate moment, CEO Kwan's phone suddenly rang loudly, violently shattering the calm atmosphere in the room. He glanced at the screen and his expression changed instantly. It was his father calling again. He hesitated for a second, then answered the call and put it on speaker so Tu Lac could hear everything clearly. The voice on the other end was ice cold, filled with controlled fury and absolute, ruthless determination. CEO Kwan, listen to me carefully. I will do whatever it takes to stop this nonsense. By any means necessary, I will make sure you two do not stay together. CEO Kwan's grip on the phone tightened noticeably. Tu Lac's eyes widened in fear and pain as she listened, her heart starting to race rapidly. His father continued, his voice growing sharper, colder, and more threatening with every single word. You are my son. You carry the future of this family and this entire company on your shoulders. You will marry someone from the right background, a girl from a prestigious, well-connected family, someone who matches our status perfectly, someone who can strengthen our business alliances and bring even more power and wealth to our name. Not some country girl who brings nothing but trouble and complications. This relationship ends now, one way or another. If you refuse to listen to me, I will personally destroy everything you built. The company, the partnerships, your reputation, your future. I will tear it all down if that's what it takes. Do you understand me? The harsh, devastating words hit like thunder in the quiet hospital room. CEO Kwan stood frozen, staring at the wall with a pale face as the full weight of the threat sank deep into him. This was no longer just emotional pressure from a disappointed father. It was a full declaration of war. The call ended abruptly as his father hung up without waiting for any reply, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence that felt even more oppressive and terrifying than before. CEO Kwan slowly lowered the phone, his hand visibly shaking. He turned back to look at Tu Lac, who had heard every single painful and threatening word. Her eyes were filled with shock, deep pain, and fresh tears. The peaceful moment they had shared just minutes earlier had completely vanished, replaced by a dark, looming cloud of uncertainty, fear, and an impending crisis that threatened to destroy everything they held dear. What will happen next in their story? Will CEO Kwan have the strength and courage to protect their love against his father's ruthless determination and powerful threats? Or will the immense pressure from family, business, society, and harsh reality finally become too much and tear them apart forever? This is exactly where things get even more intense. The real battle for their love is only just beginning. In this emotional love story, CEO Kwan's world shatters when his beloved Tu Lac fights for her life in the hospital. After she survives the critical stage, CEO Kwan stays by her side day and night, caring for her with unwavering love and tenderness. However, their happiness is short-lived when CEO Kwan's powerful father storms in, furious that his son is involved with a simple country girl. He demands CEO Kwan end the relationship to protect a major business partnership with the BN family. In a powerful moment, CEO Kwan defies his father, declaring that he chooses Tu Lac over everything: wealth, status, and the family empire. But the story takes a dark turn when his father calls back, vowing to destroy everything CEO Kwan has built and force him to marry someone from a prestigious background. Will CEO Kwan's love withstand his father's ruthless threats, or will their relationship crumble under the pressure of family and society?